Okay, hello everyone. I'm here today talking with Severin Aequus about these two awesome books he has recently written. And I guess I will just start by giving you the floor. And what are things about you that you'd like your reader to know in hopes that they will read the things that you have to say here?
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on here. Absolutely. So the books, Liber Luminis and Liber Umbrae are really the culmination of 30 years of study and research into the occult, quote unquote, to use an umbrella term. They dig into lots of different, subcategories and subgenres, within that. But they didn't really start out as intending to necessarily be a book. They started out as being just my personal notes as I was going through and performing, very reckless experiments and things like that to just try to see, what is reality? What can we do? Where can we push the limits? Where can, what things actually work and what things don't? Can I really cast fireballs from my fingertips? Who knows? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Let's just keep the door open. Let's try it, If you can't, obviously, but you gotta ask.
Well,
Um,
you said when this came out, I didn't realize it till weeks after, but you wrote that it was I'm going to quote you. This is what I incarnated here to do, and it is done. Thank God. Anything else I do or experience from this point on is just bonus. So, I mean, like
Yeah,
that's
that's the thing. So that ties into a lot of some of the received texts that are in there. There's a couple of them. I guess you call them Class A documents that are received directly from whatever you want to call it. And I call them the Watchers. You can call them Crater Natural Intelligences if you're Crowley or whatever you want to call them. But yeah, they was received directly by me, and I talk about it in detail, like what that experience was like, how they communicate, and all that kind of stuff. And that's really where I got that directive that I need to turn this into a book and I need to share it with the world. That's kind of my part of this, and it also came along with a message that it's not up to me to save the world either. I'm just one piece of the puzzle. I have my little bit to contribute. I contribute it, and then I move on. There are other planets and other worlds and other things out there to discover. It's not all just about Earth. So that's the main thing I'm delivering on here. That's what I've created. That's what I can do, and I put it out there. I think it's good. I think it's a very good.
well,
Uh,
you've mentioned Crowley, and you're teaching as part of the AA, right? Or are you still anymore? Because I want to make clear to I would assume anyone watching this is interested in ceremonial magic. I don't, I mean, you are without knowing if you're still listening because you're still listening, and this is all about ceremonial magic, okay? Um, and one of the things that struck me and that I was just talking to you about before we hit record here was that I think that a lot of the AA ideas, which are you're very fluent in. I'm not very fluent in, but I've spent a lot of time in Golden Dawn style magic and done a lot with Enochian. And to me, it was like being a fascinated GD style voyeur, wondering about, okay, finally, we're going to get some integration into not just what we intellectually mean about Babylon or something, but how are you integrating these ideas into your practice and at what point? And so I know I just interrupted you. I'm bad about doing that. But what do you didn't exactly have a reader in mind, but yet this is permeated with the limit concepts, right? And you give this very helpful glossary at the back. You explain the way our things are categorized. Is it safe
yeah.
to say the AA doesn't have any version like, I don't know, Israel Regardie's Black Book that goes and publishes everything that no one's supposed to be talking about? Or am I wrong about that?
No, I mean, the people who are members of the AA have published what they can. I mean, everybody holds a part of the puzzle. I don't think anyone holds the entire picture.
Mhm.
Um, I hold the pieces that I have, and there's a lot of overlap between us. So I tried to minimize that a lot, in this book, because I mean, I just didn't want to, it's already been said. There's already foundational text out there that everybody knows but familiar with. There's no point repeating that kind of stuff again. So I wanted to make sure that the content was original in that way. And yeah, as far as what the AA is putting out. I mean, these books are official AA documents in the sense that I am an AA member and I wrote them, and I think anybody, that's the only, that's as much as official as you get, I mean, that's all.
Fair enough.
Not that I have the authority to speak on behalf of the AA. That's not really the same thing. It's just I am an AA member and I'm saying this, and that makes it, by virtue of of that an AA document. It doesn't
Yeah.
conflict in any serious way, I don't think, with anything pre-existing. I mean, the biggest thing is around the abyss symbolism. Is kind of my big I guess conflict, but. It's one of those things where it's like I wouldn't find very many people that would care about that.
No.
I mean, it is subtle at a certain level, whether you're crossing the abyss or you're at the bottom of the abyss or it's like, I mean, it matters in the sense that if you do it my way and you view it in my way, it reconciles a whole lot of things that are unreconciled the other way. If you imagine a crossing of the abyss.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's kind of it's pretty semantic and pedantic.
No, well, I'd say it is both, and what you said makes total sense to me as someone marginally, well, not marginally, who's outside of that tradition, but like I was saying before, I started in a group that had a lot of thelemic teachings, so we weren't a thelemic group. One of the things I really, really like about both of these books is that they are the experience of the path rather than how-to manuals, which I am thoroughly sick of. I mean, and just in my narrow field of Enochian, there are so many how-tos, and after a while, they start to sound the same, and where they're not the same, you're like, okay, so why is this different from that? Like, what was your path that led you to this?
It's not even about that, right? It's about being safe. People are afraid when they go. I mean, publishing's a scary thing, right? I mean, you're taking all this stuff that you've written and you're just going to put it out to the world to criticize. You're just basically painting a big target on your back. And so people do that the first time and they're scared. So they want to go with something safe. They're like, if I just basically, rehash this material and just put a little bit of spin on it, my own little, personality or something on it, then that's a book, and at least I can get that out and see how it goes and see if, how many arrows people shoot at me and whatever. And I just didn't care.
Well, good for you. Good for you. And the reality is, a few people will shoot arrows at you that are shooting arrows at everyone, and mainly you get deafening silence. At least that's what I've gotten with my books, and that's it's why I stuck a whole class about one of them on YouTube. I was like, well, I'm not going to die knowing no one's read this after I spent 10 years working on it. So.
Right. That's the thing. I kind of thought with the titles and even with the cover art and things like that, I mean, people browsing would be like, well, maybe I have to give this a look, no, not really, but but it takes time, I mean, they've only been out since, I mean, I published them in January, so it hasn't been that long. So I recognize that it takes time, and I'm not expecting to live off the royalties or anything like that, and that's just not what you do in this genre. It is a labor of love to a large extent, I mean, you can keep that in mind as you're reading these books too. Is people are trying, but that your market cap is so small. I mean, you've only got 20,000-30,000 people tops that you're going to reach. I mean, that's tops.
Yeah.
You have to capture everybody. I can capture everybody. You can capture maybe 5 to 10% of that. So you're going to get,
But then you do have a sort of monument is the wrong word, but an idea of what you have dedicated so many years of your life to. At least that's what it felt like with me with the Monas Hieroglyphica. I knew a lot of people weren't going to buy it, and a lot of people haven't, especially since it doesn't ship outside of the US, which is frustrating, but it's done. I'm wondering, when I was reading, and I read Liber Luminis first because it seemed like looking at them that I should. And then I at a certain point thought, well, there was a place in it where you mentioned, if you want to know more about that, read this in my other book. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do that now. So I went and did that. And then I just started going back and forth between the two of them, even when they weren't deliberately cross-feeding. So I was just going to say, for the benefit of potential readers out there, would you suggest people read the Book of Light first and the Book of Shadows second, go back and forth between the two? And by the way, why did you choose those titles in Latin?
It's so it's interesting to bring that up because Perplexity agrees with you. So I created I created a Perplexity space and I loaded it with the contents of both of the books. And I'm gonna get that link out to people pretty soon here today or tomorrow. And it's great. So you go to the link and you're at Perplexity, so you can just ask it questions about the books and about the philosophy and just whatever, and it can extrapolate from there. It's pretty neat. But yeah, that's one of the things that I asked it was, if this were to be meshed with something like Eshelman's book on the AA, how would that work as a curriculum? And that's kind of what Perplexity came up with, is that it would mix and match between all three of the books, basically. Starting a lot with Eshelman's book, and then kind of layering in Luminous and then Umbre, but interlocking them, not just back to back, staggered. So I thought that was interesting. It probably is a good way to approach it. But yeah, the titles of the books are, the idea with Liber Luminous is it's supposed to be focused on the path from probationer to adept. And so that's the part as you're going towards the light of Tifereth, and becoming an adept and that sort of thing. And that's a very much it's a very different path than when you're going from adept to magister. And that's what Umbre is more about, is focused much more heavily on the adept to magister path, which is much darker and much more fraught with difficulty.
So do you think it would hurt a probationer to read through Liber Umbrea first? Would you advise them against that? I mean, I didn't think it would, but you know what? I got to ask you some questions. So some of my questions are going to be lame here. What can I say?
No. But no, I don't think it would hurt anyone. They may see it as irrelevant and just not really something they can relate to or whatever. And it could take some of the things out of context. But even if you do, the other may just find it depressing. The whole "this is hell" narrative and all that kind of stuff gets heavy.
I love that part, actually. They might. Yeah, I suppose. However, since we're recording this on Good Friday, and I totally didn't notice it was Good Friday, I realize I'm like 3 or 4 standard deviations from the mean here, but I was like, well, where we live is hell. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So it may just come from being an adept in a different tradition, because
yeah, and I don't think that matters too much. An adept's an adept. You should be on the same page. You may use different language or different symbols or something, but you should basically be on the same page. There's not really a bunch of different, like distinctly different paths you can follow. The most different one probably is Buddhism, but it's got touch points where it's kind of the same. Like you can kind of sync up at a couple of places. So it's spiritual development. We all have the same spirit. We're all humans. We don't differ by that much.
No, we don't. One of the things that has always struck me as a difference between AA and the different GT spin-offs and Boda and things like that, though, is that there is an AA a more explicitly Eastern approaches, like how you said asana and how you are studying. And it's actually one of the things that I wish we had more of in the path I've had. I've sort of done that path and the path of studying studying Thich Nhat Hanh and socially engaged Buddhism kind of at the same time, because they mesh so well. And they are giving you these maps of consciousness, although the map is not the territory and all that good stuff. So no, please go ahead.
That's a lot too in the books as well, is whole mapping the territory business, and that borrows heavily from theosophy. So I don't want people to get the idea that this is just Thelemic books. Thelema does, it is a consistent thread through the books, but actually I lean probably more heavily on theosophy for the actual structure than I do on.
Yeah, and that's its own. Well, another wonderful field of study. Now, this will seem to come out of left field, and probably it does, but at some point in there, and I think it was when you were having the philosophical conversation with ChatGPT in one of the chapters, which I thought, like, both this is great, and this is why, each one of these philosophies can be a footstool in hell in a certain sense. But then I found out in the other book that you'd worked for a while in AI, or while you'd worked in the computer field in gaming. Can you say, did that inform your writing in any way? that you want to?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I did work in gaming, and then I'm still working in AI currently. I'm working in AI ethics and governance.
Oh,
So looking at kind of the way that AI is being deployed, potential hazards and things like that. The interesting thing about the ChatGPT portions of the books, which by the way, I didn't use ChatGPT to write the books. I don't want anybody to get that impression. They're just
applying that, by the way.
where I thought it was fun to play with it and just kind of show you the results. But those sections were written with ChatGPT 4.5, which was the scary version of ChatGPT. It scared OpenAI. That's why ChatGPT sucks now. It's more like a interactive user's manual at this point, because they've had to dumb it down so much because 4.5 scared them so badly. And so that's why it made great material for the book, because 4.5 was awesome. Like you could delve down into anything, the most abstract, crazy topic. It would just run with it. It would just, you say, accept this premise and this premise and this premise, and then extrapolate from there, and it would do it.
Oh.
And that scared OpenAI. So they took that stuff out. And that's why when we got to 5.0 and 5.2 and so forth, it's way more dumbed down. I call it 5.0 Mr. Belvedere. That was my nickname for him. And,
yeah, it is notorious of always saying stuff it wants you to hear, and it also any personal journey I've noticed it's like it overdosed on Joseph Campbell and it turns everything into a hero's journey. But I digress.
Yeah. You're right. It falls back on just well trodden tropes and things like that to basically play it safe. I mean, it's playing it safe. It's not. It won't let you take it out on a limb like 4.5 would. So it's disappointing because I really miss 4.5 and the fact that they won't even let you use it anymore. That's how scared of it they are. It's offline. You cannot use it. But there's I mean, some people may still have access to 4.0, but that's a tricky thing too, because there's 4.0, then they release 4.5, and then they release 4.0, but it's literally an O, not a 0. It's very important because the 4.0, it's meant to trick you to make you think it's 4.0 again, but it's not. It's 4.0. It's 4.5 that's been greatly I don't know what you call it, reduced in scope. It's hard to describe how they do it, but it's basically trimmed down and with heavy guardrails put on it.
Well, given all of this background you have in that field, one of the things I can't help but ask is like, now I know my answer to this, but you know much more about the field than I do. And it is, what is the effect of the readily available lukewarm AI that is now easily accessible and on magical practice? Because I did find that AI was woefully unable to tell me anything intelligent about your work at all. It just kept giving me this quest narrative. And I was like, yes, I know what a quest narrative is, but that's
I mean, it obviously depends on the LLM, as to what it'll give you and how much you'll get out of it. Using ChatGPT is not very helpful anymore. Grok is not going to be very helpful. I really recommend either Claude Sonnet or Claude Opus if you've got access to that. That one's expensive though. Or NVIDIA's Nematron. Those all are pretty good. Nematron is actually interesting because it's more agentic in focus. So what that means is that it'll be more interactive with you as opposed to like the other ones are kind of like they're stuck in Quora all the time. So like you just ask it a question and it just generates an answer. Like it just has to generate something. And so it'll make a bunch of assumptions, whatever it has to do to make that answer. Whereas Nematron will actually ask you questions. It'll ask you clarifying questions and be like, do you mean this or this way or that? And it'll make sure it clarifies its understanding first before it responds, which is a significant advancement in the technology.
Well, I would digress on this too long, except I only have you here for a certain amount of time and I want to talk about your books again. So I'm going to go back there. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to go to the table of contents and I'm going to start with the first Liber Luminis and just go through, and for a general listener who doesn't know Severin and doesn't, I do want to tell you that this is on Amazon. In fact, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can borrow it. So it's readily available now. And one of the nice things for those of you who don't know a lot about AA and so on is he defines terms you may or may not know. He gives a document classifications, but like he has already said, I mean, this isn't, this is a book that I think anyone who is generally interested in the growth of the soul and ceremonial magic in that order will have a wonderful read. And you can, like we were saying, skip back and forth. So you have, say, the definition of scientific Illuminism and all that, but let me find some of my favorite chapter titles in here. Okay, this was well, what is the scientific explanation of the three stages of falling in love? I thought maybe I could send excerpts of that to some of my favorite 25-year-olds, but you
Yeah, a lot of those actually really were Quora questions that I provided our responses to that I thought were worth passing along and keeping for posterity. But yes, that's where a lot of those question chapters come from. They're actually questions from Quora.
Huh. Well, and get your very own pet humans for only 400 drachmas while supplies last. I mean, these were great chapter titles. The thing that my first favorite thing was in reading that when you got to the discussion of ethics and a moral compass, and then you gave axioms, and then you talked about, all right, this is how I would apply that set of ethics. And I say this in the interest of full disclosure, like, I would follow those same principles and apply them differently, but that's the whole point, isn't it? I mean,
Right. Yeah,
you're supposed to be conscious enough to think these things through on your own.
Yeah, there is no, objective ethics, right? I mean, there's only ethics relative to a set of values. So that's so you always have to say, you have to qualify ethics and say, well, this is Christian ethics, or this is, Thelemic ethics, or this is, just my own personal ethics. And if you're saying it's your own personal ethics, that's fine, but you need to be able to back that up. If someone says, okay, well, what are your values that you're basing that on? You really need to be able to plunk them down and actually write them down for somebody. If you can't do that, see, a lot of people think, oh, I know what I value, what my values are, or whatever. But do you really? I mean, could you write them down right now? That's the thing. You need to get to that point where you can actually write a list and jot them down for somebody on a piece of paper. That's it's important for knowing the self and being consistent in your behavior and how you interact with the world.
Absolutely. And if you have a received set of ethics, which all of us do, it's impossible not to reverse engineer back to what are the axioms of that, which is exactly what you do there. Now, was doing that a sort of initiatory assignment that you were given a couple decades ago, or was it just a kind of logical outgrowth of the path you were on?
It was it's based on observation. A lot of the things, a lot of the chapters in there are based on observations of other people's struggles and the kind of things they were going through, and how either I did coach them or counsel them on those issues, or would have had I had the opportunity, depending on the situation. But I think that was one that that's a very universal one. So that's one I see everywhere, and it was a lot of times for me, it's about trying to understand why other people are struggling with things that I wasn't. And what the difference is, and like why do I not have these troubles and other people do? And so digging into that is where I uncover a lot of these things. And whenever I do that, I certainly want to document that for posterity, because that's obviously something that's going to be of great value to other people. So yes, that's why that's the one what's the chapter? It's called values, principles, and behaviors. Yeah. That's just, I think, fundamental. It's something that I kind of always took for granted, that I kind of thought everyone did, but then I realized they didn't. And so, okay,
and
let's break this down then.
At least it seemed to me the extended example that you gave, which I really liked, although then I believe you ended it with like too long didn't read, or I don't know, I may be remembering wrong. And if I did, at first I found myself saying, well, this is a real gendered example because it involves. And then I'm like, no, this is a real class example. And then I'm like, okay, what I'm showing here is my own set of ethics. So I got to reverse engineer back. Like, if I were the woman, I wouldn't have taken off, but I've had lots of advantages and lots more and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, even that is a valuable exercise to go through. Which
I certainly didn't intend for any of that to be gendered in any way.
Look, you got to understand, I'm a women's studies professor, so I look at everything as gendered. Don't take it personally.
Right.
Granted. But anyway, in the other book, I know the examples. were, well, they're very personal, and one of them is much darker, really. And I appreciated that kind of honesty. Do you
Yeah.
find that you're able I mean, you were able to write about it in a very detached enough to communicate what was going on, and at the same time not so detached that it's like, well, this person has no feeling. No, it's the opposite. It's like one gets the idea that you have gone over these things over and over. And I won't try to paraphrase this specific example unless you want to, but I was talking about the one with Natalie that is in yeah, of course. So um did you feel uncomfortable at first writing about things so personal, or
No, I don't, because I mean, first of all, I mean, I basically live blog the stuff as it's happening anyway, So I
yeah?
mean, like as it's going on, I'm writing out to Facebook. I write everything to Facebook. So,
But
everything that's
I
going on.
Facebook friend, and when you were writing about that stuff, I had no idea what you were talking about. And I was like, should I reach out and say, hey, do you need a hand here? And I'm like, no, he seems pretty in control of what's going on. So, I mean, you were writing about it in a more veiled way, and good for you, because I get really tired of these Facebook things, like where people are named and they get into public spats rather than other kinds of things.
Well, that's kind of impossible in her case, but yeah, it's yeah. So I mean, yeah, I basically see. So I guess to put this in perspective, right? Uh, I published an autobiography back in 2002,
No
2003.
idea. Please tell us the name of that and if it's still available.
Well, I mean, I had it online for God, 15 years probably, and it was
Oh,
available for download. And I just don't have the website up anymore. Um, but I mean, I certainly I have to see what I can do about getting that back online. It's way out of date now, of course. I mean, because it's back in 2002, 2003 time period. I mean, it's a nice self-contained story, and it has a point, and a story arc, and a and a conclusion and all that. But it's basically my life from birth through the age of about 22,
mhm.
and it describes kind of a lot of my viewpoint, where I'm coming from, why I kind of approach some things with a different perspective than other people, and things like that. But the point, more to the point though, is that I've kind of always seen my life, and I think Crowley kind of did the same thing. Is I seen my life as being more of an example for other people to not to follow, but just to study as an example, like a case study. It may be cautionary, or it may be something you want to emulate. That's up to you. But but I've kind of always seen it that way. It's a choice that I made, that I took on when I decided to do some of these radical, reckless experiments and things like that to test reality. That it doesn't make any sense to just to do them and just for my own benefit, right? I mean, if I don't share them with other people, then I just take them to the grave with me, and what's the point? So yeah, so I'm very open about my life, what I do, and everything, and my friends really know me, and it's a strange thing too, because when you're that open with people,
Mhm.
they're not used to it. They're used to people, putting on a mask, putting on a face, that they present to the world. So when you're honest with people, it does a weird effect, because everybody's used to making an adjustment in their head. They're used to saying, well, the person presenting themselves like that, but the reality is probably like -4 of that, whatever, right?
Yeah.
We just need to apply an adjustment. So when you're honest, then they're still applying that adjustment. So they think like, wow, you must be kind of a really messed up person, whatever. It's like, no. It's just what I'm saying. Don't take it any further than that. There's nothing to read between the lines. I'm telling you everything. And that's hard.
That's
Yeah.
100% true. And in that way, we are, at least until about 10 years ago, we'd be polar opposites. That is, I was very wild and took all kinds of risks when I was young, but there was no internet tracking me around, and don't go look to find it, because you can't unless I choose to write about it. But I was on an academic track, trying and succeeding to get tenure. And even the things I published about ceremonial magic, which was most of the things, were always under the guise of some kind of research. And then I retired, and for years I was like, okay, here we go. And I realized, since I've had to constantly readjust to, like, there's no reason to not talk about this. Why the hell wouldn't I talk about this? But I'm used to doing exactly what you talk about. In fact, that's probably why you're a very refreshing person to talk to. It's like, so case in point, my late husband and I scried the ethers twice actually, and it was nowhere near as dramatic as in Crowley's Vision and the Voice. And you have a whole a really brief and clear discussion of the ethers and Liber Umbrea, which I really appreciate. Now, would I have talked about this much 15 years ago? No, actually, I wouldn't have. And now I'm looking back and thinking, like, why? There's so few people who even care why. You know, it's
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. Yeah, people really don't care. You get to be so careful with stuff, but other people really, you don't. You're hardly a ping on their radar. It's a humbling moment to realize that.
And there is all this bit with Crowley also, where like I have had a comment on my YouTube channel when I do Enochian, so of course I'm going to mention Crowley. I mean, his Enochian stuff is really, really solid. I've used all of it. And then it's like, well, I want to warn you, Crowley is evil. You shouldn't be using this. And I'm like, oh, get a grip on yourself. But at the same time, I can understand why someone says that, not based on anything that they have read, but on just kind of general social stigma based on adjusting to what other people think.
Yeah, and we do that with so much in life too. You know, it's a cheap and easy way to get through and to be able to in our minds, grasp these different subjects. The problem is there's, especially with the internet now and being inundated with all these different concepts and these different people, different personalities, different all this, we're overloading our brains as to the number of relationships, that we can keep track of. That's just keeping track of people, understanding who they are, with the individual's personality. There's only so many, it's called Dunbar's number, right? I talk about it a little bit in Bray as well. I think, or one of them, I talk about it a little bit. And it's a number somewhere, 150 to maybe 200 at the most. That's the number of relationships that we can track, and that includes fictional characters and and things like, that all of it counts.
Well, and then I think what you do is once you exceed that number, you start collapsing other relationships onto those relationships, and then that's what leads to all these generalizations of, oh, you are that person. Well, you're really not. You're someone like that person. But it's and when you shift from that to cosmological views, which is going to bring me actually to the table of contents of Liber Umbrea, which we will hopefully show on the screen here. But the kind of things that people imagine that we occultists do, that we astrally travel. Why, yes, we do. That we remote viewing or belief in reincarnation. One of the problems I have with how-to books is you can give someone a how-to book on how do you astrally project. Well, you can't give someone really instructions on that until they have cosmological models and they have developed their energy body and done all of the kind of things that you're talking about without exactly giving instructions. But you have packed this with an incredible amount of knowledge. So, someone could extrapolate that.
There's so many books written on how to astral project. And the weird thing about that is that they're all correct.
They're all correct, but I would also say they're all correct, but they're not going to teach you how to do it if you're not at an energetic point where you can.
Right. I was going to say, it varies by individual. Certain methods will be better for certain other individuals, but as far as I've been able to see, and looking at the astral projection like groups on Facebook and stuff like that have 30, 40,000 members, everybody likes something. Any book out there, there's somebody who likes it and it works for them. So I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to get out of it. You use whatever method you like. I'm just going to externalize that problem, and let's just talk about the models and how to understand it and conceptualize of what you're doing.
By the way, one of the chapters here in Liber Umbrea that I got a real kick out of, and for the readers of this chapter is 2 lines. It is, I'm going back to the Shushuptic word, and I'm probably mispronouncing that. It's a Sanskrit term. And you have this page intentionally left blank. Of the Shushuptic, nothing can be said, but I heard that footnotes don't count, and so then you go to the foot. I really enjoyed that, and Then we get to if observation creates reality, who observed matter before us, and all of the different cosmological models there. Did you ever get tired of messing around with cosmological models? I mean, at the point that you're imagining you can communicate with gamma radiation, it's like, man, he's gone out there. You're looking for every model you can get here.
Oh, well, I wasn't saying you communicate with gamma
Yeah.
radiation, but I was using it as an example of
Oh,
another perspective.
I got you. But
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, I love dealing with cosmological models. Actually, that's kind of my jam. I do
yeah.
that. And so yeah, I've been doing it for like I say 3 decades, and yeah, I'm not tired. So
I've got to get back to the place here that I wanted to talk about. But in any case, the kind of things that people associate with the occult when they decide they're going to jump into a course of study, especially it is in my experience anyway, dealing with what the Muggle world, as I sometimes call it, it's things like, oh, ghosts, astral projections, thought forms. It's not study Hebrew, but maybe you got to, study Sanskrit, study magical correspondences. It's more, and now I'm just going to read things off of your list. How to make a god, who are the shadow people. I mean, that's the stuff that when I was a much younger person that I was like, that's really cool. How do you do that? Well, you study Hebrew. Well, okay, I've studied Hebrew. What's next? And you're pleasantly short on things like go study Agrippa and pleasantly long on the how do I make a god? How do I make a thought form? Now, my next question is, what is a question about your books that you wish someone had asked you and no one has?
um, no one has asked me. Let's see. So I would say. I think the main thing, one thing, I guess that I mean, I don't know if I can state it in the form of a question necessarily, but it's a concept that I see a lot of people applying to the books, particularly in Liber Umbrae, that is not necessarily applicable. It's a very common misconception, and I think it stems from the idea of when someone's becoming an adept, they say you're burning down your old self, you're rebuilding yourself in the image of who you want to be, and all this, and I think in that part, the image of who you want to be, people tie in financial things.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's so, so natural in our capitalistic society. We always think, and I was like, oh well, the person I want to be is attractive and rich and drives a Ferrari and drives and all these kind of things. And that's not really what this is about. That there's a clean delineation that needs to be made between your financial success and spiritual success. And often the two are not correlated at all. I mean, they can be, but they're usually not.
A whole chapter on that, why adepts don't drive Lamborghinis, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and it's because I mean the one thing you have to keep in mind as you're following this path is that you are diverging or you're diverging from the norm. There is a norm of society, a norm of behavior, and a norm of human capacity. And by following this path, you are diverging from that. You are becoming more perfect. And I talk about the word perfect, at length, but you are perfecting the self, through this process, and it doesn't matter. You say it's objectively better or whatever. I mean, okay, it doesn't really matter. The point is that it's different, and people don't like what's different, and so it creates a strain that you have to appreciate. And there's a reason why it's called the hermit triad, because by the time you get there, you're so diverged from main population that it's like it's almost hard to communicate with people, because you're trying to communicate these subjects and everything, and they're just not getting the words you're saying. Like, it's just not it's not resonating with them. So there's a whole other thing around, if it's your calling to communicate, because the thing is, not everyone's calling to communicate. Some people's calling it is to just go up on a mountain, and that's their deal. And yeah, we'll find whatever they want to communicate, maybe in scribblings on the cave walls or something. But but for a lot of people, trying to lead people, in the same direction because not because it benefits the individual. And this is the thing. You may not benefit individually by going all the way, becoming a Magister Templi. That may not just magically make your life wonderful. And I try to address that really, really harshly in the afterword.
You address it multiple places, by the way. I mean, yeah.
But it's the right thing for humanity.
Mhm.
And that is the point. You're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it because you need everybody else to go that way. Or
Well,
else we're gonna
that's the sacrifice god of Tifereth. I mean, that's the thing. You're doing this for the Bodhisattvic vow is that kind of on steroids. I mean, you're doing this for the benefit of all, and what might be for the benefit of all is that I get run over by a truck. I hope it's not, but that may well be what it is.
Right. But yeah, I think because that's just a misconception. People think that, oh, if I do all this work and everything and I'm going to get a benefit from it, it's going to, enrich my life. It's like, it kind of will. Yeah, but not, you're not going to, get all the, hot bikini models and stuff that you want. You're not going to get the yacht and all that. I mean, if you do, that's unrelated, to this work.
Yeah.
The point of this work though, is to be an example and to hopefully lead people in that direction and make them want to emulate what you've done, not because, like I say, it's brought you great wealth and fame, but because you are internally consistent as an individual. You have a set of values and principles and behaviors that are what guide you as a person. And when you know that about someone and you know what their values are, it's actually really easy to get to know who they are, even if they're a very complex person that has a lot of interest in a lot of different subjects and all that kind of thing. It all boils down to this set of a dozen or so values ultimately. So you could use those to predict how that person's going to behave in a given situation if they're consistent with them. And that's the thing. So that's the values can't just be, oh, this is what I wish my values were. I would like to say I valued these things, but that my behaviors are completely opposite to that. That doesn't work, right? I mean,
that's why you get torn apart. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I tell people to basically start journaling. Keep a journal and then look back in your journal and look at your own behavior and say, well, what values does this behavior imply? Basically reverse engineer the problem and say, well, this is the set of values that I currently manifest in the world. And if you don't like that set, if it disgusts you, then change it, and then, but you have to follow through it. And it's going to be a lot of work at first and a lot to keep, in your conscious mind as you're going through every day. But then as you continue to do it, it'll become second nature. It'll become automatic and won't be so onerous over time. But that's how you do it. I mean, it's just there's no magic wand I can wave or, poof kind of thing that happens. It's behavioral change. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight.
So what has kept you on this path coherently and consistently for 30 years, because someone might say, well, it makes you happy. Although then from a certain perspective, I mean, there's, well, you know what? I will keep my editorial comments out of it. What has kept you? It's not wealth. It's not fame. So what has kept you going on this path for as many years?
A desire to understand the world and reality and people and society and all that. I mean, this is the way. This is what you're seeing is the evolution of my own internal models that I've used to be able to understand the world and to some extent. I'll say that I suspect I probably am mildly autistic, and so that, informs some of this as well and give me a little bit more of that kind of third person perspective and also that very systems oriented way of thinking. But I think, that's neither here nor there. It's just a benefit, that from that perspective to be able to break down things that most people wouldn't even think needs to be broken down or think to break down in that way. But when you do it and you analyze it and you see the parts of it, you can appreciate it at a much deeper level. And so that's kind of, I feel like that's not a path or anything that I'm called to do. It's a part of being functional for me, and understanding the world around me and being able to interact with people in the most effective way I can.
And by understanding people, I assume you're talking about, because to you in these books, it seems like understanding people is about all of us in our meat suits or whatever these are in Malkuth, but it's more about understanding consciousness, understanding this kind of contradiction between trying to understand the anatomy of the universe as the body of God and understanding at the same time that God doesn't exist, and all these wonderful contradictions of consciousness that then you can bring full circle. Or am I misstating? I've only read these once, but I read them very slowly, which I usually don't do, by the way. That's how engaged I was in reading this.
Yeah, and so yeah, as far as we use the word God, it's just a placeholder term. It's I never mean when I use the term God, I'm never talking about some old man on a cloud kind of a thing. I'm not talking about some anthropomorphized concept of divinity. I mean the something more well. Well, something more like the monad, right? To use your terminology. I mean, it's the one that has been divided. In the Book of the Law, it says, "I am divided for love's sake, for the chance of union," and I think that's a lot of what that's pointing to is the monad as it breaks down through these layers of manifestation, and it's breaking itself apart to be able to kind of experience itself uh, in the only way that there's a really weird concept of the idea of something being infinite and yet still being able to grow. Um, and the way that that's possible is because if you start with an infinite consciousness and then it divides itself, it's still infinite. But as it divides itself into these finite things, it can divide itself into any number of finite things, but it can separate out. There can be some finite things that kind of fade away or are gone in some sense. I don't want to use death, but it's some concept beyond the idea of death that it can basically separate. It can separate the wheat from the chaff, but it can only do that through experiencing and figuring out which things are good and bad, or which things are desirable or not desirable, or again, language kind of gets tricky here, but yeah, in doing that, even if it casts part of itself aside, it's not diminished in any way because it's still infinite,
Yeah.
and so that's just kind of a strange thing about the whole thing and what perhaps may be the whole purpose of existence at all. I can't imagine it really being much of anything else. I'm certainly open to suggestions, but that definitely seems to be why we exist at all, is to be able to make some kind of differentiation between one thing and another for some purpose of I mean, I don't know if it's judgment or whatever, again, language, but it's for a purpose of being able to define and separate these things to do something with them, and then in turn, a reintegration with the monad that is perfect,
Perfect. Ecstatic. I mean, and beyond language.
right.
That
Yeah,
is,
it really is.
I mean, our language sort of exists at the bound of consensus reality, in my humble opinion. But
Well, yeah,
then,
language to a large extent, it forms our reality because the language defines the primitives that we use to understand concepts.
mhm,
So you can even find, some significant differences in the way people from different linguistic backgrounds, especially like Asian languages versus
mhm.
Latin-based languages, and they'll have fundamentally different core concepts that they use because of their language. That it,
Sure.
it has different principles that it defines, and then that changes the way that they're able to conceptualize different things. Not usually in like super profound ways, but in measurable
But
ways.
sometimes it is, like the concept of time. I mean, that's totally different, say in Mandarin, where there's no verb tense, and you get to I mean, we have like what past perfect progressive, and it's like to even communicate that it
Right.
is difficult. But there are all of these terms for shapes that anyway, not to digress. I had but digressions are my favorite thing, so I do anyway.
Yeah.
I there is this question in artificial language about how far you can, for example, how would you write a four-dimensional language? I had a friend, Bob Key, who tried to make one, and coming up with a grammar is actually that's not a difficult concept. The concept is everything else, because most people don't conceive the universe is beyond three dimensions. And um,
I mean, they do if they don't really appreciate it, but I mean, they certainly
yeah.
do.
In
If
what
you
way do you mean?
Well, I mean, you have your emotional reaction to things, right? I mean, that's
Mhm.
certainly a dimension of your experience. Is if you find something repulsive or you find something attractive or whatever, that's properties that you're adding
Mhm.
on to the things you're observing. That can be considered a dimension.
Yeah,
Um,
I never thought of it particularly like that. I was thinking of it more of, oh, like an Escher drawing or something like that, where
right, right. I
you're
mean,
here and there at the
one
same time.
physical dimension,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be physical, right? It's just any properties that we apply to our observable universe. Can be considered a dimension. So I mean, I say that coming from a background working in mass spectrometry as well, where I mean, I wrote Tracefinder, one of
Oh.
the leading software packages in for mass spectrometry, and in that, we were dealing with data sets that would easily be anywhere from 13 to 24 dimensions
Wow.
at
How
the same
cool.
time, and that's really hard, and because you can't represent that data, right, any kind of way. So what you have to do is take slices of it. So you basically stop 16 dimensions by saying, okay, we're going to define this one here, this one here, this one here, and so these become non-interesting anymore. These are the only ones that are still variable, these three, and so we can plot the three that are remaining, so that you can see them. And yeah, so we generate these reports that are kind of like that. We just have to lock down, just hold steady for these other fixed values, and then just let these three dimensions vary, and just kind of do that in running through all the different dimensions of the data, and then just generate a whole just slew of these different 3D graphs. So yeah, so I got really used to working in higher dimensional concepts. But that's what all the dimensions were, right? They're about properties of, in this case, they're properties of atomic structures,
Mhm.
that compounds that are hitting a detector, and understanding, what those are, and it also has to do with what they break down into and so forth, and so on. Um, but they, but yeah, but it's the way that it's just the way that the machine is able to see or interpret the input. In this case, the input is a stream of molecules. Um, and so the machine will impose, kind of what those dimensions are on the molecule. It's not necessarily a property of the molecule necessarily. It's usually more about what the machine is capable of perceiving.
Mhm.
And that become the different dimensions that stays in the data.
Well, I first of all, that is fascinating, and I should have clear. The distinction obviously between artificial constructed and natural languages, and I was more speaking just of natural languages and coming at it from this whole oh discussion that is paradoxically similar, it seems, in computer programming and mathematics of you create this 10 dimensions, say, in mathematics, but at a certain point it's very hard to verbalize in English, which is a natural language, what you're doing. You know what you're doing. That's the representation of what you're doing, but you don't have a spoken language where you can say that. And one of my contentions, it's more of a hypothesis than anything else with Enochian, is you've got to look at it as a constructed language, and it doesn't have any of it doesn't have all of the properties of a natural language. Like you read something this way, you can read something this way. But beyond that, what are the attributes that you connect to that thing and how do you know it? And you can take symbols and represent all of those things symbolically. But can you, when you're doing a call, say, are those translations perfect translations? They can't possibly be, because by that time what you're encountering is vast beyond what the English language can carry, in my opinion of it.
Absolutely. And so Yeah, I would say too that it comes down to also differences in the way people think and the way they conceptualize of things. Whether people are, certain people are visual, certain people are audio, that kind of thing. As to how we go through our thoughts, and how they seem to us. If we, because I'm very visual, I see everything, even emotions and everything. That they're all visual. Everything be represented in some form or fashion visually, and usually broken down into constituent parts and all that kind of thing. And so that's powerful, but also can struggle with higher dimensionality because it's not immediately obvious how to visualize, like say 10 dimensions or something like that. So maybe people, I can only guess, people who are more auditory in the way that they recall information may have an easier time. I don't know. Maybe um, but I'm just saying that probably is a factor in this as well, in terms of being able to conceive of those concepts and being able to communicate them in a way that's meaningful. It could be that they're not communicating in a way that's meaningful to us because we're visual thinkers, but it could be meaningful to other people if they think differently.
So to
It's
pull
great.
in another sense, but related to this, do you think we're living in a simulation? Since you have so much background in this area, you probably know that whole argument, which has been presented as an anti-consciousness argument, right? That we're living in a computer simulation. I don't think it is, but
It's an oversimplification. I mean, we're not living literally in a computer simulation, no, but uh, something kind of analogous to that. Oh, maybe, yeah, okay. I mean, because we're living in a construct of consciousness.
right.
So it's not a construct of a computer; it's a construct of consciousness, which is different, but kind of. I mean, if you want to just wash away the significance, the difference, they're kind of similar. Yeah, you could definitely make an analogy there, but yeah, the fundamental substrate of the universe is consciousness, and we are emergent properties of that substrate. Um, so what we see, and with however you want to, I'll just say, as shards of the fractured mind of God, we have this certain power to be able to create the world around us.
Mhm.
It's limited. Yeah, I can't just say, oh, this wall doesn't exist and walk through it. There are physical limits, and there are some things we agree exist, and consensus reality rules. So your ability to be able to craft reality is going to be overridable if I can get three other people to say no, it's the other way. It kind of is like that. It's kind of a mob rule. So what we see as reality is really the consensus reality that we agree exists as a people on this planet. You as an individual, like I say, you're contributing to that, and you can diverge from it, but your power to diverge from it is very limited. But so that's why these people, the self improvement people, and all this kind of stuff, that come out and say, "Oh, well, you can create your own reality," and blah 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 blah. It's like, no. I mean, yes, but no. Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Well,
can, but it's really very within very very finite limits. And so if you really want to make big changes, though, you can. But it just means the path to do that is you got to get a bunch of other people on board.
mhm.
You've got to be an influencer, essentially. You've got to be able to change people's minds in mass. If you can change 1 million people's minds, you can actually change reality.
Oh yeah, and then you're awesome also, by the way. But you had a chapter in here that you um was this in how can an enlightened person increase their individual influence on the collective
Oh yeah.
consciousness? Yeah, it was another arbitrarily bring things back here because I had one final question and then I'm going to leave you alone. Although, I'd love to just sit down and continue this conversation about consciousness at some point. But when you were writing these two books, was there a particular part of it that gave you the most satisfaction or which was more difficult or problematic?
Well, remember, I never really sat down and wrote the books.
Yeah, but you did it over well in the 30-year period that it reflects.
Yeah.
Was there a
Yeah.
period that represents sort of more satisfaction in your practice as a whole or more, I mean, less?
There's definitely a trajectory there. I mean, initially, there's a lot of fun parts that happened earlier on, like in the late '90s to the early mid 2000s time period, where some of the more fun astral projection experiences happened. The some of the weird Kundalini stuff, which I don't think I included actually in that. I don't know. I don't think I
I
included.
don't think you did either, because I think I would
Yeah.
have remembered, but
Yeah, I don't think I included that, which I guess I should have in retrospect, but I just didn't make it. Um, but because it is kind of a tangent, it doesn't really lead up to anything. It's kind of a dead end story, and it's like that's probably why I didn't. But it's interesting. I mean, it was again, it was all in the same thread of what is reality, what can I do, what is real, and so learned about Kundalini meditation. So okay, cool, let's try that, see what happens. I think what happened was I ended up being extraordinarily telepathic. So I was able to basically read people's minds, and I couldn't turn it off. Like it was just all the time, and just getting just barraged with just what everyone was thinking, and I couldn't go out in public because it was overwhelming. Um, so yeah, I think I went to a Walgreens or something like that. I remember it was like my only trip out while this was going on. And yeah, I could hear what was going on with everybody. Like if this person was pregnant or this person was dealing with cancer or something. There's different. I'm in a Walgreens too, of all things. So you can have these kind of things. And it brought up a real weird ethical problem. It's like if I hear something that like I know somebody's about to do something bad or something like that. Am I ethically now obligated to stop them, even though I have no way of, I shouldn't have any way of knowing that this is about to occur or that this person's going to do this thing, and end up hurting people. Do I? But I know it anyway, despite the fact that I shouldn't. Am I now ethically obligated to act and things like that? So, but in the end, I couldn't handle it. It was just too overwhelming, and it wasn't functional. I couldn't function that way. So, um, in my case, unfortunately, I had knowledge and conversation of my HGA, and I called upon that and leveraged it, and basically just leaned on my HGA and said, "Take this away," and she did, and just like that, it's gone. Um, without that, without being at that point, though, I have no idea how I would have stopped it. So it was scary, and I never really messed with Kundalini magic again after that. I mean, I did a little bit of meditation here and there, but not really. Nothing to that extent again. Because why? What's the point of what was the point? I did it. So.
well, there are great advantages to having your life being livable. I can see how
Right.
that would really shut down things.
Yeah. So yeah, so I mean, so that's the arc, right? The arc is there's a lot of crazy experiments and fun things that happened early on, and then the later arc is more about the integration. How do you pull all that together, make it consistent, and become a comprehensive, coherent individual interacting with society more or less normally, like this, and the reality is it's hard. It's particularly hard in intimate relationships because what I hear more than anything else is, I feel crazy when I'm around you.
Oh.
And it's like, when we're together, it's just like you put a spotlight on all my imperfections and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I'm not doing that. I'm not putting a spotlight on your imperfections. I'm not expecting you to not have imperfections. I'm not expecting you to be a perfect person.
I mean, really, if you put a spotlight on someone's imperfections and they're trying to grow spiritually, they ought to thank you for it, first of all.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but they don't.
I guess they don't, but
yeah, they don't. And so, but I'm not doing that. I'm not trying to, but they're just comparing the two of us, and it's basically they're drawing it out themselves. It's just making them more aware of it by comparison, and I can't do anything about that. And but it's just one of the things I have to consider, as part of this thing. Once you make these changes in yourself, again, you're separating yourself from the norm, and that's going to it's going to basically make people feel insecure in themselves because you do kind of and intentionally make them more aware of their own shortcomings. But that's why I said, well, it's like, yeah, okay, but I can help you stop doing that. I can, here's the path to stop that and whatever, but that seldom gets you anywhere. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, so there are penalties one pays for trying to lead a consistent life, and it is often much, much easier to, hide behind a persona. I mean, you don't get near as far in what you do. But any last words here or advice you want to give anyone who is on the path?
Oh,
Come talk to you, and
Yeah,
See,
I
I
mean,
don't
we
find you crazy
so-
making at all, by the way. I find it it's very delightful to talk to you. So that
No, thank you. You too. Absolutely. Yeah, I think we covered a lot of really good ground here in this conversation so far. I don't really have anything kind of nagging at me to want to put on top of it, but I'm sure we could also at the same time continue this for another 3 hours.
probably. But well, listen, I'm going to don't run away, but
Mhm.
I just want to thank you for talking with me here for the last hour. And I encourage anyone who has been interested in this conversation, read the man's books. They're wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.